Hi, this is Debbie from Lime Doodle Design, and today for Suzy Stamp I'm going to be looking at creating a summery clothesline that uses in part the new Summertime Animals set. For this clothesline design I was inspired by the watercolour note card by Suzy Plantamura, and it got me thinking about how when we come back from the beach we rinse everything off, give everything a wash and then hang it up to dry ready for the next day. In addition to the trunks from the Summertime Animals set, I'm also going to be using the flip-flops from Flip-Flop Season, as well as from Warm Winter Wishes. I'm going to be using the palm trees and also the beach ball. I don't do this very often, but for today I wanted to create a one-layer card, and therefore on printer paper I thought it was a good idea to plan everything out beforehand, make sure I could fit everything in and how it needed to be spaced. To start with, I'm using the plan and the Molotow masking fluid pen to create a couple of blank areas that I don't want watercoloured initially. Now, the Molotow masking fluid pen will protect those from the watercolours as I watercolour the sky, and therefore will leave some white clouds and also an area for the sunshine which I can then come and colour in later with some yellows without having to worry about the blues that I'll have put down for the background for the sky. I've placed the watercolour card into the Misty stamping tool, and I've cut a piece of post-it note to represent the towel, and this will mask that area so that when I stamp the palm trees it will appear like some of the palm tree leaves are behind the towel. I'm using Suzy Stamp Intense Black ink, and I'm going to use the Misty stamping tool to stamp the palm trees several times because the surface of the watercolour card is textured. You won't get a very good impression on the first time you stamp it. And so therefore I'm going to stamp it several times until I get a nice dark black outline for the palm trees. I'm not very good at freehanding things, and therefore I'm using the A2 card curved edge die to give a nice curve to the washing line, and I'm using a waterproof pen that's Pigma Micron, and I think that's in size 0.3, which will give a line which won't be affected by the watercolours when I watercolour over the top. I'm also using this waterproof pen to touch up the lines of the palm trees just where the stamping hadn't quite caught. I'm now continuing on to stamp the beach ball from Warm Winter Wishes and the flip-flops from Flip-Flop Season. Really the only slightly tricky bit to this card is to stamp the trunks without stamping the bear, and so I've placed the bear on the Misty stamping tool door so that the trunks will line up with the washing line, and then I'm going to cover the areas of the bear that I don't want any ink on. I'm covering those with some washi tape. Then when I add the Intense Black ink, those areas will be protected from the ink, and then I can peel off the washi tape and then stamp down onto the card. I'm just going to make sure I rub off any possible areas that there might be ink and then stamp down, and that gives the first impression of the trunks. And I'll go back in and I'll do that a couple of times again as I did before so that I get a nice black outline. There's a few areas which I hadn't quite managed to mask the right bits without missing some of the lines of the swimming trunks, and so again I went back in with a waterproof pen and just tidied those up. I'm also going to use the pen to draw around the towel and also to draw very simple pegs to peg all the washing on the line. I'm then going to pop the card back into the Misty for the final time and using Tina Bikini to stamp the wording onto the towel. For once I didn't mind that texture of the watercolour card made the stamping slightly uneven, as I felt this gave more of a texture of a beach towel. Now that we've got all the stamping in place, I'm going to move on to watercolouring, and I'm going to be using the Gansey Tambi watercolour palette. I'm going to start off by blocking in areas of colour. I often do this, put down a very light wash of the colours that I want in each area. So some light beiges for the sands, some blue for the sky and some green for the palm tree leaves. And then that just gives me a base on which to start building the layers up. I'm moving on to adding some royal blue to the swimming trunks, and as we're talking swimming trunks and not a swimsuit or a bikini, I want to keep the colours quite boyish, so I'm going to be adding some yellows and oranges along with the blues. To prevent any colour seeping from one area to the next, I'm dotting around the picture, adding colour to different areas and then letting those dry before moving on to adding colour to their neighbouring areas. For each area that I'm colouring, I'm starting off by bringing in some paint into the deepest areas of the shadows, and then washing my brush off slightly and bringing that back to the paint and spreading that out with the water that's now in the brush to help dilute the colour and give the impression of some highlights and shadows. And I'll keep doing that over and over again so that some areas probably I painted several times. For example, the palm tree leaves, I know I went back into over those at least 3, 4, 5 times, I'm not quite sure. But the thing is that when the paint dries back it lightens in colour, and then you can sort of say, actually, I think I'd like that a bit darker, as I'm doing here with the sky, or I want to add a bit more shadows, I don't think there's enough shadows and highlights, so I'll go back in and add some more depth into the shadows, and that will give the impression of more dimension. And slowly but surely you build up layer on layer on layer, until finally that you're happy that you've got enough depth and detail in there. I'm finishing off and then I'm going to dry this panel fully before removing the masking fluid. And that's the trick with masking fluid, is that you want to make sure that the masking fluid is fully dry before you start painting, and equally that the paint is fully dry before you try and remove the masking fluid. I'm using an adhesive eraser which removes everything cleanly, and then I'm left with two fluffy white clouds and an area for painting the sunshine. If I tried to paint the sun over a blue sky without having used the masking fluid, then I would have layered yellow over blue and you would have ended up with the sun looking green, so that obviously wouldn't be very nice. So by using the masking fluid, it left me an area that I could come in and paint the sun. I've dried the panel again and I'm now using a bone folder to fold the score cleanly, and then I'm going to trim that down to an A2 top folding card. I've added some paint splatters to the sky and the sand, and you could leave it at that and call this card complete. However, I've recently become enamoured with my Prismacolor pencils for adding some final details, and I think that's great to revisit some supplies that we've previously got and discover new uses for them. I've never used Prismacolor pencils on top of my colouring before, with it being watercolour or equally Copic markers, but I'm really enjoying the flexibility to come back in at the end and add those final details. I've picked out some Prismacolor pencils that match the colours of the card, and I'm going into the shadow areas and scribbling a little bit of the pencil into the shadow areas, and then I'm using a paper stub that's been dipped in Gamsol just to soften the edges of those areas. I wouldn't say you could actually blend the pencil out. I don't think that the pencil moves as much as it would with watercolours or anything like that, but you can certainly soften the edges of the pencil area with the Gamsol. And as a finish off with the pencils, that completes this one layer watercolour card of a summery clothesline complete with sewing trunks, flip-flops and a beach towel. I think the clothesline idea could be used for other occasions as well, so not just for a beach scene, but you could perhaps have a row of men's ties for Father's Day. I'm sure if you look through your stamp sets you'll find plenty of clothes or other items that could be hung from a clothesline to create this type of card. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.